Hello everybody, it's True Detective here. I have an album review for you. ELECTRON TIDES of Darkness. This is Finnish crafted masterpiece of a very unknown genre called SPACESYNTH. The album was surely made with great heart and love. The first sound with all of us reminds older 16-bit games like those from Nintendo, brought into more detail. That's Finnish synthwave. A really underground music genre. The way the songs change parts and go from pattern into the next and back is lovely, cause there's really no endless repetition of the same sounds as with some electronic music genres and the artists. And this artist ELECTRON, he was one of the older SPACESYNTH artists. This album is from the year 2006. It's an adventure. You might be in outer space, some faraway galaxy, and the hero of the story. You're determined to change the world, bring peace and harmony into the realm, and on the journey meeting many strangers, interesting beings. This album is an invitation into imagination. So we have to keep in mind that this was the early days of electronic music production, 2006. It is very emotionally packed too. There's also vocoder parts to underline that the album is about loss, loneliness, departing and finding your own way in life. On the journey we might discover some hostile territory too, but with the right weaponry and gear we can surely triumph any space hostility we find. Then we start to jump into more of the origins of the SPACESYNTH genre, namely that it's based on Italo disco. The operating systems weren't very developed back in those times. It was the time of PS2, I believe. In the album there's also some historical references and themes into space exploration that Americans did. It's a thought experiment into how most of our knowledge about outer space is relied on outer resources, not of our own experiences. So we have to cut some slack for the repetitiveness and the lack of variability in this record. It brings to my mind a lifestyle of back in those days of cheap soda and microwave pizza, ADSL modems and the whole fare that was related to growing of Finnish economy in these times. From the imagination we come back into reality and the questions of how this album was actually born. If you don't understand Finnish culture and how it was back in those times, you probably cannot place the finger on where the magical feeling in this calm album comes from. I feel that it's a very positive type of an album. I start to feel on the later parts of the album that the creator of the sounds has left the wheel or the holodeck and the music is playing on its own. That it's no longer created by humans indeed, but it surely was not the time of AI generated music either. There's also an element of art for art's sake over here, depicting manufacture and the quality of the actual electronics, PCBs and the parts of the computers. With the sounds that they make, it doesn't have that huge struggle with the sounds that they themselves create, adding a conceptual layer to this record that makes you think of old western movies where the pianos are playing themselves. As the album progresses, the human element is removed more and more until we find ourselves in a more tropical soundscapes. I mean, a huge struggle of a process to create it and to depict some kind of battle. In Finland there are 4 seasons and you can again sense how the artist himself has come back and experienced the real world out there. There's a feeling of victory and a kind of loop to the beginning of the album. It's not an album like that. I remember listening to this album at the Computer Festival Assembly here in Finland. Like in outer space and flashing lights all around us, the album comes into a drifting in space, like being an astronaut on a mission, just waiting. Then we are taken into action, maybe an old arcade with those plastic pistols you fired at the screen. Fast-paced action ensues. You can hear the popular culture has affected this SPACESYNTH artist heavily. References like Bionic Commando come into mind in the more actionable parts of the record. The songs become a bit more repetitive near the middle of the part of the album, and quite honest, I'm starting to lose interest in listening to it. But I decide that do not abort the mission, but instead to keep on searching the right words to describe what I hear. You might realize certain patterns being used here and timings that repeat in some of the songs, just with different sounds. One of the songs is also faded out, in my own opinion, at the kind of a wrong timing. This was sort of an album that really for me couldn't maybe stand the test of time. The rhythms here are not maybe variable enough, and it feels that some of the album's songs later in the whole of it were called Finnish at quite an experimental stage. If we are now trying to rank SPACESYNTH artists in the top 10 order, I would say that Electron is positioned to be at least in the 10 best of them. I liked it a lot back then when. But as a whole, you know, there's only a couple of really strong songs in this one. And it's very unknown and underground genre of music that in my own opinion should be revived with some current day computer hardware and software options available. The Tides of Darkness album is from the year 2006, and considering that, it has stood the test of time very well. It's still a great introduction to SPACESYNTH. The rhythms of the album might not be very well suited for running, jogging or cycling. I would say that this album sounds like it's made by someone who wasn't very physically active. That's just my guess. Some songs become pretty disco though, so there's some dance worthiness here. But that's why I chose to review it over here, because I know that most of you guys have never heard this album. But this music genre is not for the party types, no. In the later part of the album there's also some electronic xylophone and ocarina type sounds, reminding me of old PS2 games like Dark Cloud and of course Zelda. Because I have listened to this album so many times in the past, it might not affect me in such a strong way, but for someone that has never heard this type of music, it might even bring some tears in your eyes. And as I said, some of them have been left at the maybe a bit experimental stage. So that's my introduction, one of the strongest old SPACESYNTH artist Electron with the 2006 album Tides of Darkness. Thanks for coming to read this True Detective album review of Electron Tides of Darkness. The hero is back and the day has been saved. Now go and listen to it with more thought one more time. Go and check it out. Stay tuned for more reviews like this in the future here at my YouTube channel, and maybe in the future time blog reserved just for these album reviews. All of these albums I reviewed, you search for them on YouTube, Spotify, whatever platform you use, you will probably find all of these on either one of those two. Thanks for watching this review.